This story is titled, My Brother Who Stole My Wife. 4 years ago, finally came home for a visit. He mocked me with my ex until my dad dropped the truth that wrecked them. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I've been trying to write this post for a while now, but it's not easy putting everything into words. I guess I should start from the beginning, back when things were normal and I actually thought I had a good life. So a year ago, I, 32 male, was living what I thought was pretty much the perfect life with my wife Sarah, 30 female. We'd been married for 5 years at that point, had our own house. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, you know. We even had this amazing Maine Coon cat named Lumi, who Sarah gave me for our first anniversary. Man, that cat is something else. Pure white fur, super intelligent, and definitely thinks she runs the household. Let's be real, she does. I work in software development, not making crazy Silicon Valley money or anything, but enough that we were comfortable. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher at this really nice school about 20 minutes from our place. She was really good at her job too. Like, parents would specifically request to have their kids in her class. Every day she'd come home with these hilarious stories about what the kids did or said. We'd sit at dinner and just laugh about all the weird things that happened in her classroom. We had this whole routine that just worked, you know? Mornings were our thing. We'd get up early and have coffee together before work. Sarah would do this thing where she'd steal my coffee when she thought I wasn't looking, even though she had her own right in front of her. Said mine always tasted better for some reason. Weekends were for sleeping in, well, trying to. Lumi had other ideas about breakfast time, making pancakes and just doing normal couple stuff. My older brother Jake, 35 male, was around a lot too. He worked at this big investment firm downtown, always showing up in these expensive suits and that stupid Mercedes he wouldn't shut up about. Mom and Dad basically thought he was God's gift to the family business. Dad owns this pretty successful construction company that Jake helped manage the finances for. Everyone was always talking about how successful Jake was, how smart he was with money, how he was really making something of himself. I started noticing the signs, but I didn't piece them together at the time. Jake would randomly stop by our house when he knew I was working late, always finding an excuse to be around. At family dinners, he somehow always ended up sitting next to Sarah. Then there were the little comments, subtle digs about my house, my car, or my job. Never outright insults, just these offhand remarks about how he could never settle for my lifestyle. But you don't expect that kind of thing from your own brother, right? And every time he said something, Sarah would just roll her eyes and cuddle closer to me, so I figured everything was fine. Sarah and I had all these plans we were working on. We'd been saving up for a bigger house, talking about having kids soon. She'd already picked out names, wanted to name a boy after her grandfather, stuff like that. We even started looking at houses with bigger yards because Sarah was convinced Lumi needed more space to express herself. Pretty sure Lumi just wanted more birds to watch through the windows. Man, Lumi was so excited every time we went house hunting. Sarah would hold up these cat beds or toys at different stores and ask, "What do you think of this for your new room, Lumi?" Like the cat was going to give design advice or something. But that was Sarah, always including Lumi in everything like she was our kid. I really thought we had it all figured out. Good jobs, nice house, plans for the future, amazing cat. What more could you want, right? Sarah seemed happy too. We still did date nights every month, still cuddled on the couch watching movies with Lumi sprawled across both our laps. She still kissed me goodbye every morning and sent me random texts during the day just to say she loved me. I know this probably sounds super boring to most people. No crazy parties or exotic vacations or anything. Just normal life stuff. But I liked it. I liked coming home to Sarah and Lumi, liked our little routines, liked planning our future together. Liked that Sarah seemed to want the same things I did. Yeah, Jake would make comments sometimes about how I needed to think bigger or take more risks, like him. But I had everything I wanted. But funny, how fast things can change, how people you trust completely can just, yeah. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That was my life a year ago. Normal, happy, stable, the calm before everything went to hell, I guess. So remember how I mentioned those monthly date nights with Sarah? We had this favorite Italian place called Romano's. Nothing super fancy, but the food was amazing, and they knew us there. Like the owner Mario would always save our table and bring out this special garlic bread Sarah loved. That night started normal enough. I got to Romano's early because I wanted to surprise Sarah with flowers. She'd had a rough week at work dealing with some angry parent. I remember being kind of excited because I'd also found this little cat-shaped keychain that looked exactly like Lumi, and I knew Sarah would love it. I was walking to our usual table when I saw them. Jake and Sarah sitting in this corner booth. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. Like, maybe they ran into each other? Maybe they were planning something for my birthday? But nah, the way they were sitting, how close they were. Jake's hand was on hers, and Sarah was looking at him with this expression I used to think was just for me. I just stood there, locked in place, watching my brother and my wife look at each other the way she used to look at me. They didn't even notice me at first, just sitting there, all cozy, laughing about something. Then Sarah looked up and saw me standing there with these stupid flowers in my hand. You guys want to know what she did? She smiled. Not even an embarrassed smile or a guilty smile. Just this casual smile, like she'd been waiting for me to find out. And Jake? This piece of work actually said, and I swear I'm not making this up, "Oh, hey, bro. We were wondering when you'd figure it out." Like this was some kind of game or something. I just stood there for a minute, probably looking like an idiot. Then Jake goes, "Come on, you had to know Sarah was too good for your lifestyle." And that's when it really sunk in. This wasn't just about Sarah. This wasn't even just about betrayal. This was about disrespect. It wasn't enough for Jake to have more money, a flashier car, or dad's approval. He had to take my wife. And not just take her, he wanted me to see it. To know that he could step into my life, take what was mine, and win. He wasn't just trying to steal Sarah, he was trying to erase me. My fist clenched so tight I felt my nails dig into my palms. My own brother, the guy who was supposed to have my back, had looked at my life and decided he was entitled to it. And Sarah? She didn't just let it happen. She went along with it. Like I was nothing. Like I never mattered. Every guy knows there's a line you don't cross. You don't mess with your brother's girl. You don't tear down your own blood just to prove a point. But Jake never believed in lines. Not when it came to me. I'm not proud of what I did next, but in that moment, I completely lost it. The betrayal, the smugness, the way they sat there so casually like they hadn't just destroyed my life, it all hit me at once. I don't even remember what I yelled, just that my voice was shaking with rage. My hands were clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms, but it wasn't enough. I needed to do something, so I swiped my arm across the table, knocking over their fancy bottle of wine, some overpriced crap Jake probably bought with company money. Glass shattered, red wine spilled across the table like blood, and suddenly the whole restaurant was staring. Jake shot up from his seat, acting all indignant, like I was the problem here. He stepped toward me, running his mouth about how I was overreacting, how Sarah had chosen him, like that made it okay. Something in me just snapped. I lunged at him, shoving him so hard he stumbled into a chair. For a second, he actually looked scared. But before I could do anything else, the staff was between us, pulling me back, telling me to calm down, like I was the one who had started this. And Sarah? She didn't flinch, didn't defend me, didn't even look guilty. She just sat there, arms crossed, lips pressed in that irritated way she did when I forgot to take the trash out. Like I was ruining her evening, like this wasn't my entire life crashing down around me. That's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. Neither of them were. I left and drove home. Couldn't even think straight. Lumi knew something was wrong the second I walked in. She's scary smart like that. Just followed me around the house meowing while I paced and tried to figure out what to do. Sarah didn't come home that night, or the next night, or ever again actually. Went straight to Jake's place. Guess they'd been planning this for a while. The next day I got these texts that I still have saved, because sometimes I need to remind myself I'm not crazy. Jake, look man, these things happen. Sarah and I have a real connection. You're my brother and all, but you gotta admit she deserves better than your basic 9-to-5 life. No hard feelings? Sarah, I was going to tell you eventually. Jake and I just clicked. He has ambition, you know. Goals. All you care about is your little programming job and that cat. I need more than that. Then they both started calling and texting, trying to explain how they didn't mean for this to happen, and how sometimes love just finds you, and all this other BS. Jake even had the nerve to say, bros before hoes doesn't apply when it's true love, right? I didn't respond to any of it. Just sat on my couch with Lumi in my lap, trying to process how my life had just completely fallen apart. The worst part wasn't that I lost Sarah. It wasn't even that Jake had her. It was that I felt small, like I'd let this happen, like I wasn't enough, not for Sarah, not for my own family. And that feeling? That burned more than anything. The next few weeks were a mess. Sarah came by when I was at work and took a bunch of her stuff. She tried to take Lumi too, but my neighbor, shout out to Mrs. Chen, real MVP, saw what was happening and called me. I rushed home and Sarah was literally trying to get Lumi into a carrier while my cat was having none of it. I lost it again. Told Sarah she could take whatever else she wanted, but Lumi was my cat. Her anniversary gift to me, registered in my name, all vet records in my name. She actually tried to argue that she picked Lumi out, so technically the cat was hers. Yeah, no, that was my line in the sand. Meanwhile, Jake kept showing up at my work, trying to explain things, saying stuff like, "You'll thank me later," and Sarah was always meant for someone like me. Someone like him. What does that even mean? A lying, cheating dirtbag who steals his brother's wife? The worst part? Some of my family actually took their side. Mom was upset but kept saying stuff like, "Well, you know how Jake is." Like that made it okay. Dad was more concerned about how this would affect the business than how I was doing. Only my sister Katie straight up told Jake he was dead to her. But even with Katie in my corner, I wasn't prepared for what came next. The divorce was a complete nightmare. Sarah hired this aggressive lawyer who tried to take everything, wanted half my savings, my car, which I bought before we even met, and even tried to argue she deserved money for contributing to my career growth because she supported me emotionally while I got promotions. Like, what? The worst part was how they tried to get Lumi. Sarah's lawyer actually argued in court that since Sarah picked out Lumi, she had emotional ownership, or some garbage like that. The judge shut that down real quick when I showed all the vet records, registration papers, and proof that Lumi was a gift to me. Should have seen Sarah's face when she realized she couldn't take my cat. First time her perfect little act cracked. Jake was there at every court meeting, sitting right behind Sarah like some kind of bodyguard in his expensive suits. He kept trying to talk to me in the hallways, saying stuff like, "Come on, man, let's be reasonable here," and "You're still my brother, we can work this out." Like he actually thought I'd want anything to do with him after what he did. While all this was happening, they started posting all over Instagram and Facebook about their amazing love story and how sometimes the heart wants what it wants. Jake even posted this long thing about how true love means taking risks and tagged Sarah in it. Made me want to throw my phone across the room. Lumi actually knocked it out of my hands once when I was getting too worked up reading their stuff, like she knew it wasn't good for me. The divorce finally got settled after 2 months of back and forth. I kept the house. I bought it before marriage with my own savings, my car, and obviously Lumi. Sarah got her car and whatever she'd already taken from the house. She tried to argue for more, but her lawyer finally told her she didn't have a case. Here's where it starts getting good, though. Remember how Jake worked at Dad's construction company, handling all the finances? Well, right after the divorce was final, they posted all these vacation photos from the Maldives. The funny thing? Dad had been noticing some weird numbers in the company accounts. Nothing major at first, just little things that didn't add up. But these vacation posts made him look closer. Why? Because the trip they were bragging about cost more than Jake's yearly salary. Meanwhile, I was actually doing okay. I stopped visiting the family house. I focused on work, got a promotion because turns out when you're not dealing with a cheating wife and backstabbing brother, you can actually get stuff done. Lumi and I got into this routine. Morning cuddles, work from home some days. She loves lying on my keyboard during Zoom meetings. Evening walks around the neighborhood where she follows me like a dog. My sister Katie started coming over more too. She's the only one in the family who completely cut Jake off. She and Lumi became best buddies. Pretty sure my cat likes her better than me sometimes. Katie would bring over takeout and we'd just hang out, her playing with Lumi while telling me all the family gossip I was missing. That's when we started hearing stuff about Jake at work. Nothing concrete at first, just whispers about numbers not matching up. Missing receipts, weird transfers. Dad wasn't saying anything, but Katie noticed he was staying late at the office a lot, having meetings with accountants. Sarah wasn't looking so happy in their social media posts anymore either. The designer clothes posts slowed down, the fancy dinner pics stopped. Jake was still posting about living large and success mindset, but something seemed off. Then one day, while I was working from home, I got this call from Dad. His voice was different, serious in a way I'd never heard before. "Family meeting tomorrow," he said. "Your brother will be there." I tried to say no, but Dad cut me off. "This isn't a request, and trust me, you want to be there for this." I really didn't want to go. Hadn't been to my parents' house since Jake and Sarah announced their engagement 3 months after my divorce was final. Yeah, they moved that fast. But Dad wasn't taking no for an answer. That morning was weird. Lumi somehow knew something was up. She wouldn't leave me alone while I was getting ready, kept following me around meowing. Walking into that house was, man, I don't know how to describe it. You know that feeling when you're about to get into a fight and your whole body is just tensed up? Like that, but worse. Jake's stupid Mercedes was in the driveway, the one he always bragged about, parked crooked like he'd been in a hurry. They were already there when I walked in. Jake and Sarah sitting on the couch like they owned the place. Jake in another expensive suit, Sarah decked out in designer everything. The second I walked in, Jake started with his usual crap. "Hey, ugly, still driving that Toyota?" He smirked. His fiancée added, "How's the cat? Still your only companion? Real mature, right?" I clenched my jaw, inhaling deeply through my nose. I had spent years preparing for this moment, convincing myself that if I ever saw them again, I wouldn't let them get to me, that I had grown beyond their petty jabs. But I was about to get up and leave because it didn't feel right when Dad walked in. Now, you gotta understand my dad. He's not a loud guy, doesn't yell or anything. But when he wants attention, you shut up. He's got this way of just commanding a room. He sat down at his desk, the same desk where he used to help us with homework when we were kids, and pulled out this thick folder. Just set it there between us all. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Dad looked straight at Jake and said, "Want to tell me about the Anderson contract?" Jake's face did this weird thing, like he tried to keep smirking but couldn't quite manage it. "What about it?" Dad pulled out some papers. Interesting numbers here. Contract was for $2.4 million, but our books only show $1.8 million received. Want to explain that? Sarah shifted in her seat. Jake waved his hand like it was nothing. Probably just a clerical error. I'll have accounting look into it. Already did, Dad said. Started laying out more papers. Just like I looked into the Wilson project, and about 20 other contracts over the past year. The room got really quiet. Jake's face was doing that twitchy thing it does when he's nervous. Sarah was clutching her designer purse so hard. "You really thought I wouldn't notice?" Dad asked. He wasn't yelling. Almost wish he had been. This calm voice was way worse. "You thought you could steal from your own family?" Jake tried to laugh it off. "Dad, come on. This is ridiculous. I've made this company more money than—" By stealing from it? Dad cut him off. By creating fake accounts? By skimming money from every major contract? He pulled out his laptop, turned it around. By paying for your lifestyle with company funds? The screen showed all these transactions. The Maldives trip, Sarah's shopping sprees, Jake's Mercedes payments, all paid for with company money through some complicated system of fake accounts and doctored invoices. Sarah started to say something, but Dad held up his hand. "Oh, I know about your involvement too. The separate account in your name? The one getting regular transfers from our business accounts? Yeah, found that too." I just sat there watching it all unfold. Part of me wanted to laugh. All those times Jake bragged about his financial genius and business skills, turned out he was just stealing from Dad the whole time. Jake tried one more time. "Dad, I can explain everything. We can work this out. The company's doing better than ever." I leaned back in my chair, watching him sweat through his overpriced suit. This was the guy who stole my wife? The guy who spent years looking down on me? I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. "You thought you were the man, huh? Funny how that worked out." Jake's face twitched like he wanted to say something, but he had nothing. Because for the first time in his life, there was no way to talk his way out of it. "Because of the contracts you didn't steal from?" Dad asked. Then he picked up another paper. "But we're not done. Want to tell me about Mom's medical fund?" Now, quick background. Our mom passed away a few months before Jake and Sarah started their thing. She'd been sick for a while, needed lots of expensive treatments. Dad had set up this special fund for her care, was putting like $5,000 a month into it. Jake was supposed to handle all the payments since he was so good with money. Dad pulled out these bank statements, showed how all that money that was supposed to be for Mom's care, never made it to the hospital. Instead, it went straight into Jake's personal accounts. While Mom was struggling in the hospital, Jake was using her medical money to buy himself fancy suits and take Sarah on expensive dates. I felt sick, like physically sick. The affair was bad enough. But this? Using Mom's medical money? That's like a whole different level of messed up. Jake started stammering, trying to make excuses. There was a mix-up with the accounts. I was going to pay it back. The treatments weren't working anyway. Sarah just sat there, her face getting whiter and whiter. Guess she didn't know about this part. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Hard to tell with her. Dad wasn't done, though. He pulled up security camera footage on his laptop from some fancy hotel downtown. Timestamp showed it was from the night Mom. You know, there's Jake and Sarah all dressed up, laughing, dancing, while Mom was in the hospital, while I was sitting with her, while Dad was trying to reach Jake to tell him to come say goodbye. The footage was like a minute long, but felt like forever. When it ended, nobody said anything for what felt like hours. I felt sick into my stomach. I couldn't believe how far my brother would go in his betrayal. Then, Jake tried one last time. Dad, come on. I'm your son. Your successful son. The one who, the one who stole from his dying mother? Dad asked. His voice was so quiet it was scary. The one who embezzled from the family business? That successful son? Then Dad picked up this other envelope. The one he'd had on his desk the whole time. This is my will, he said. Want to know what's in it? Jake tried to smile, but it looked wrong, like his face wasn't working right. Dad, let's not be dramatic. We can work this out. I'll pay everything back. Everything goes to your brother, Dad said. Just like that. The company, the house, all of it. Sarah jumped up then. You can't do that. We'll fight it. We'll get lawyers. Dad actually laughed. Not a happy laugh. More like a go ahead and try laugh. You mean the lawyers I already talked to? The ones who have copies of all the evidence? The FBI agents who are very interested in all this fraud? Jake's face went from red to white so fast it was almost funny. Sarah started doing this weird breathing thing, like she couldn't get enough air. You're bluffing, Jake said, but his voice was shaking. You wouldn't do this to your own son? Dad stood up. He's not a tall guy, but somehow he seemed huge right then. You did this to yourself. Both of you did. Now get out of my house. Sarah grabbed her purse and ran, like literally ran out the door. Jake just sat there for a minute, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Then he looked at me, actually tried to say something, but Dad cut him off. If you ever come near this family again, Dad said, I'll make sure you spend the next 20 years in prison. Now get out. Jake left. I stayed sitting there, trying to process everything. Dad just started putting all the papers back in their folders, calm as could be, like he hadn't just destroyed Jake's whole fake life in less than an hour. When I got home that night, Lumi was waiting by the door like she always does. Jumped right into my lap when I sat down, purring like crazy. I felt somehow my rights are coming back, but the fallout was harsh. The first thing that changed was Jake's job, obviously. Dad didn't just fire him. He had the company lawyers report everything to the authorities. Turns out stealing company money and messing with medical funds is pretty illegal. Who knew, right? Jake tried to play it off at first, kept posting on LinkedIn about exciting new opportunities and time for a change. But everyone at the company knew what really happened. Word gets around fast in the construction business, and Dad didn't try to hide why Jake was gone. The Mercedes disappeared first. Guess when you're buying cars with stolen money? The bank doesn't let you keep them. Sarah posted this long rant on Facebook about how they were choosing to simplify their lifestyle and how material things don't matter when you have true love. Yeah, sure. Their fancy house was next. They'd bought it right after getting together, way bigger than they could actually afford. But Jake had been stealing enough to cover it. Now, bank took it back. They had to move into some small apartment across town. The real fun started when the FBI got involved. Remember all that evidence Dad had? Yeah. Turned out the feds were very interested in how Jake had been moving money around. They showed up at his new apartment with a search warrant and everything. My sister Katie, still the best sister ever, works at a coffee shop near their apartment and saw the whole thing. Said Jake was trying to argue with the FBI agents while Sarah just stood there crying. But she got it all on video. Not posting it here for legal reasons, but man, watching Jake try to explain why he had all these fake company documents in his apartment was pretty satisfying. Their friends started disappearing too. All those people who'd sided with them during the affair, who'd posted supportive comments about their true love, suddenly they were nowhere to be found. Funny how people disappear when you can't buy them expensive dinners anymore. About a month after everything went down, Sarah suddenly reached out, sending this long, rambling message about how she never knew about the stealing and was just as much a victim as anyone. By then, word had gotten around that I was named in Dad's will, inheriting a significant share of the business. And suddenly, the same woman who had torn my life apart wanted to talk. She didn't say it outright, but the subtext was obvious. I messed up, but maybe we can work things out? I didn't even bother responding, but I did send her a picture of Lumi sleeping on my desk at the company office. Yeah, Dad made me head of finance after Jake left. My cat's living a better life than both of them now, and honestly, that feels like perfect justice. But fate? Fate had its own sense of humor. A few days later, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown, except I wasn't alone. I was with someone new, and she was everything Sarah wasn't. Sarah froze when she saw us. Her eyes flicked between me and the woman laughing at something I said, and for the first time since she left, she looked unsure. I made eye contact with her, held it for just a second, then turned back to my date like she didn't exist. That's when I knew. She finally got it. She wasn't special. She was just a mistake I grew past. Then Jake got arrested 2 weeks ago. Looking at serious time, like decades. His lawyer keeps trying to make deals, but the evidence is pretty solid. Turns out Jake wasn't as smart with computers as he thought. The FBI found everything. Sarah filed for divorce the day after Jake's arrest, posted this whole thing on Facebook about being betrayed and how she was healing from trauma. Conveniently forgot to mention all the designer stuff she bought with stolen money. She's moved back in with her parents. Karma's funny like that. About 2 weeks after Jake went to jail, I got this call from a number I didn't recognize. Almost didn't answer it, but something told me I should. It was from the county jail. Jake's voice was different. Gone was that smug, better-than-you tone. He sounded small, broken even. First thing he said was, "I really messed up, didn't I?" I just sat there, petting Lumi, who was in my lap as usual, trying to figure out what to say. Finally went with, "Yeah, you did." That's when he started crying. Actually crying. Said he was sorry, that he never meant for things to go this far, that he just got caught up in trying to prove he was successful. Started talking about Mom, how he thinks about her every night in his cell. I let him talk. Pretty sure he'd been practicing this speech for days. When he finally finished, you know what I said? The same thing he said to me that night at Romano's. "Well, this is awkward." Then I hung up. His lawyer called the next day. Tried to convince me to speak up for Jake at his sentencing. Said something about family bonds and second chances. I just laughed and hung up again. Dad's lawyer says Jake's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The fraud stuff was bad enough, but stealing from Mom's medical fund? That's what really got the prosecutors angry. Turns out judges don't like it when you steal money meant for your dying mother's care. Sarah tried to play innocent at first, changed her last name back, deleted all their photos together, told everyone who'd listen that she had no idea about the stealing. But the FBI found emails where she was helping Jake move money around. Her trial's next month, and from what the lawyers say, she's not looking at a fun time either. Meanwhile, my life's actually gotten pretty good. The company's doing better than ever. Amazing what happens when nobody's stealing millions from it. Dad's been teaching me everything about running things, and turns out I actually like it. Numbers make sense when they're real. Bought a new house too. Nothing crazy fancy like Jake and Sarah's place, but it's perfect for me and Lumi. It has this huge window in the living room that she loves. She spends hours watching birds and judging me for not catching them for her. Life's been good though. I've even started dating again. Nothing too serious yet, but it's nice to be with someone who doesn't come with betrayal and a hidden agenda. Katie, still the best sister ever, comes over all the time with her kids, and my niece is obsessed with Lumi, always bringing her new toys and treats. Lumi pretends she's too good for them, but then plays with everything the second they leave. Classic cat move. Dad's doing great. Actually smiles more now that all the drama's over. He's talking about retiring soon, letting me take over completely. Says the company needs young blood who actually understands ethics. Pretty sure he was making a dig at Jake there. Mom would have liked how things turned out, I think. She always said honesty was more important than success. Guess she was right about that. Like she was about most things. I still think about everything sometimes. About how Jake and Sarah thought they were so smart, so above everyone else. About how they treated me like I was nothing because I was happy with a normal life. About all the times they made me feel small. But sitting here in my office, watching Lumi chase a sunbeam across my desk while I run the company Jake always bragged about carrying, I realized something. I won. Not by cheating or stealing or hurting people, just by being myself and doing things right. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and having a cat who thinks you're the greatest person in the world, even if all you do is bring her treats and clean her litter box. Edit. Thanks for all the awards and support. Lumi says thanks too. Actually, she didn't. She's asleep on my keyboard making typing this really hard. Edit 2. No, I won't share Sarah's social media or Jake's jail info. They're not worth the drama. Edit 3. And because everyone keeps asking, yes, Lumi is still the real boss of the company. She attended her first board meeting last week, slept through the whole thing but still made better decisions than Jake ever did.